Can I speak candidly for a minute? This is a great job, but sometimes I just don't want to talk about a game. Maybe I don't have much to say, maybe I feel like what I could say has already been said by others and better. A lot of times I play a game for a few hours and I just want to move on to something else. Not everything has to turn into a video. And I typically stay away from the traditional review format. I don't like talking about every aspect of a game. I tend to focus on certain things I care about. But sometimes I feel that pressure. A new game comes out and everyone is talking about it, and if I do a video on it, I can get some traffic and raise my income. I don't cover games specifically for that reason, but I'd be lying if I said it's never been a factor, even if it is quite rare. And sometimes I spend $60 to $70 on a game and I feel like I've wasted my money on something not worth my time, and if I can just make a video on it, then maybe I can at least make my money back. Neither of these are good reasons to make a video, not for this channel. So if I'm going to talk about something, I have to find a way to do it that legitimately interests me, or else I feel like I'm not just wasting my time, I'm wasting yours. So I started thinking maybe I can look at some other reviewers on YouTube and see what they're saying about the Callisto protocol. I have my own thoughts, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to focus on. So I watched SkillUp's review, and I found myself saying, yeah, I agree with most of that. I was thinking something similar. I saw G-Man's review, and he brings up some other points that I too had been considering, as well as others I hadn't. I watched Luke Stevens, and he brought up some good points. Really, if you're looking for a review, go to them. Go to anyone else. They have differing views on certain aspects, and they share views on others. They offer different perspectives, seem to have different experiences. Go watch their videos, because I can't bring myself to simply throw my voice into the conversation on whether or not this is a good game and if I recommend it. Instead, I want to briefly talk about a few topics that come up in the discussion around this game and see if I can add anything of actual value. I gotta get it out of the way that I had a terrible experience on PC. On a rig where I can play some games at 1440p at 120 frames per second on high settings, and other games at 1080 at 120 frames, the Callisto protocol struggled to maintain even 60 FPS at 1080p on medium settings. I lowered the lighting quality, I tried turning off screen space reflections and subsurface scattering, I'm playing on the latest patch. I really tried to get this thing moving. Playing on low settings wasn't an option because it made the game look hideous, so I pushed on with medium and dealt with the frame drops. The game stuttered immensely upon entering every new area, it stuttered during combat. Many combat encounters would cause the frame rate to fall from 60 to 25, making combat a miserable experience. Many parts of the game just sat at 45 FPS while doing nothing but staring at a wall. I understand the console versions are much better, but the PC audience is not negligible, and when many of the most highly viewed and trusted YouTube reviewers tend to play games on PC, this kind of botched PC port is not just unacceptable, it's stupid and it's bad business. And holy lord, how are people not talking more about the camera? Sometimes your character gets so close to the camera it's hilarious. Yeah, the camera is set up in a way that makes fighting multiple enemies very difficult, and we'll get into that in the combat section, but what really upsets me is the use of tight spaces in combat. They know how the camera works in their game. They know that if you're close to a wall, the camera completely freaks out. So why the hell are they putting enemies in tight spaces, resulting in moments like this? Design your game for your camera style. Don't put players into situations where combat leads to the camera flying up their character's ass and they have no idea what's going on. Maybe they set up the camera this way to provide a little unpredictability to the game, because it certainly isn't found in the level design or mission design. One of the most disappointing aspects of the Callisto protocol is its linearity. Watching SkillUp's review, he talked about this and he had to go on this long-winded explanation of what he means when he criticizes linearity. And it was really depressing because I know what's going through his head as he writes those lines. He's thinking, God damn it, if I criticize the linearity, I'm gonna have a bunch of morons in the comment section accusing me of saying all linearity is bad. So I'm gonna have to fully explain what linearity means and the different kinds of linearity, as well as explain the other game design concepts that go with it, it to make linearity work, and why the approach to linearity in this game is so disappointing. I could feel his exhaustion in every word, because I know he just wants to say the linearity in this game sucks and move on. This YouTube job, dealing with people looking to take issue with any sentence that comes out of your mouth, can unfortunately lead you to having to qualify every statement you make, just trying to minimize the amount of weirdos that are ready to pounce on you just because you didn't explain every detail about what you're saying, and you didn't preemptively answer every point someone could bring up. And SkillUp's points are valid. The Callisto protocol really is just walk forward the game. You have one thing to do, one place to go at any time. There are no missions where 3 things have to be done and they can be done in different orders. There are no alternate paths to your objectives, providing different experiences. The best you get is some Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Village style exploration where you can wander off the path for a few minutes in search of items, and then you go back to the path. If you're familiar with my channel's coverage of Resident Evil, you may remember my very harsh criticism of Village's linearity and my high praise of Resident Evil 4's linearity, because they are linear in very similar ways, but the experiences they provide during that linearity are very different. And that's the point SkillUp went on to explain in his review. I wouldn't say the Callisto protocol is any more linear than Dead Space, the game this developer team is famous for creating. Dead Space is super linear. It's got a fucking waypoint system for Christ's sake. Just hit the button and follow the line. But you are given many interesting things to do along that linear path, so the minimal exploration isn't really a problem. The combat is excellent, there's 0 gravity sections, using your kinetic ability to put things back together. A curated linear adventure can be incredibly exciting when done right, when the gameplay and level design complements it. Sadly, the Callisto protocol doesn't have many moments that complement its linearity, since there are very few enemy types to engage with, and the objectives all concern finding fuses and hitting switches. There are compelling moments where the game delivers new and exciting experiences to distract from its linearity, but they are few and far between. It feels like they were more concerned about designing epic sci-fi environments than coming up with interesting things to do in them. The linearity brings me to another point I want to discuss, and that's the genre of this game.
The Callisto Protocol is a next-generation take on survival horror from the mind of Glenn Schofield.
No! There's no way in hell this is a survival horror game. Not when it contains so little of what popularized the genre in the first place. Exploration-based map design? Inventory management? Route planning and backtracking? Puzzles? Unincentivized combat? No sir. A linear horror game with no puzzles or required exploration that encourages constant combat by giving you ammo drops and health from dead enemies has no right being labeled by the developer or publisher as a survival horror game. If players and critics call it survival horror, fine, I'm just gonna disagree. But the company itself should not be labeling their game as being part of the survival horror genre when it's simply not. We just got a great survival horror game a couple months ago. It's called Signalis, and everyone should play it. We got a great AAA survival horror game in Resident Evil 2 Remake in 2019. And we have a Silent Hill 2 remake on the way, and while I'm massively concerned about it, it could plausibly deliver an actual survival horror gameplay experience even if it fucks up everything else. This is a slow-paced action-adventure horror game, and having a limited inventory is not enough to let them say otherwise. It leads to further confusion of the term survival horror, and you guys are going to put Avalanche Jared into cardiac arrest someday if you keep doing this. The last thing I want to talk about isn't the story, or the characters, or the visuals, or the crappy checkpoints, or the agonizing amount of crawling and squeezing through sections, or if it's scary or not. It's the combat. Because I feel like it's being underrepresented. I'm seeing people talk about the simplicity of the combat as not just boring but also frustrating, and those are two very different criticisms. I'll explain the combat for those of you who are unfamiliar. You have a melee weapon that can do a few hits in a combo. They aren't precise inputs, you can just mash. And holding left or right will auto-dodge an incoming attack. A precise dodge will go into slow motion. You don't have to dodge any specific direction, just as long as you're holding left or right, you will dodge. And then you have to change directions to dodge the next attack. Dodge left, dodge right. Enemies will throw punches at you anywhere from 1 to 4. After the enemy finishes their attack series, you can counter hit. If you wait too long, expecting another attack, and you try to swing, the enemy might block. So it's kind of a guessing game and reading the enemy animations to figure out when you should swing. You don't want to charge into a fight swinging because you cannot interrupt enemy attacks. It's best to wait your turn. This combat system is incredibly basic and easy, and I can certainly understand the criticism of it being boring, especially in one-on-one encounters where it seems to have been designed to function the best. Due to a claustrophobic camera and very inconsistent enemy magnetism, fighting multiple enemies becomes a chore and will lead to many deaths on high difficulties, even normal difficulty. That's where the frustration comes in. But that's also where I feel like I need to mention aspects of the combat that for some reason many aren't talking about, and that's enemy stun states, advanced combat options, and the grab ability. As you upgrade your gear at printing stations, you can get a heavy charge attack, the ability to break enemy guards by breaking their arms so they can't do multiple series of punches anymore, and a low counter attack after you block, which sets them up for taking multiple attacks. These options do two things. One, they allow for more engaging one-on-one combat so you don't just have to strike, dodge, repeat the whole time. And two, they open up space control options in larger fights. Let's say I have 2 enemies in front of me and I don't want to deal with that. So after dodging one enemy's attacks, I counter hit with my heavy attack and send him flying away. Now I just have one guy for a moment. I'll avoid his attacks and do the same thing to him, and then deal with the first guy on his re-entry by shooting him. Callisto Protocol gives you plenty of ammunition, and you can buy more at the shop if you need it. Use your guns when you need them, and use the unlockable melee attacks. After doing a lot of melee damage, you'll be able to snap onto an enemy for a quick shot, and any shot will put an enemy in stun. Using a bullet every few hits will keep an enemy permanently stun locked, and you can just go to town. You don't even have to dodge opening punches to get started. As an enemy approaches, shoot them once, and now they're opened up to multiple strikes. And the energy grab, holy shit, this thing is good. Since you can grab enemies, you can do several things with them to control fights. The obvious one is to throw them into hazards. Throwing an enemy into another will stun both. A thrown enemy will be open to a hard-hitting swing that sends them flying back. Grabs can be used in the middle of your offense to slam an enemy on the ground or against the wall, stunning them for more hits. There's interesting stuff going on here. I think saying the combat is frustrating when there's multiple enemies doesn't paint a complete picture, because you're leaving out all the interesting ways to deal with them. Yes, the camera is an issue, and the magnetism sucks. But yeah, if you're treating the combat as just dodge and strike, you're gonna die a lot more than you should, and it's gonna be frustrating. I'm not saying it's perfect. Even engaging in the more interesting combat options, I still get screwed by bullshit sometimes, but I think they've honestly attempted an interesting multi-enemy combat loop in this game, and I can appreciate it. The added pressure of enemies mutating if you don't shoot their tentacles probably just serves to frustrate players more if they aren't engaging in combat this way. But I found it to be a fun kind of pressure because I was playing around with all my options and finding a lot of fun in some of these fights. It sucks that there isn't more enemy variation, because that's the main thing that drags down the experience once you get to the higher levels of combat flow. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about the Callisto Protocol. I don't know if I recommend it, probably not at full price at least. I couldn't even finish it. Once I got to the underground town, dealing with my 4th or 5th uninteresting stealth sequence, I came up against the second appearance of the two-headed boss, which is painfully uninteresting to fight. The entire level ran at 30 FPS and below, the boss fight too, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. This game simply is no fun to play in this state, and this is after the patch that came out last Saturday. I just figured, hey, everyone is talking about how bad or disappointing the game is. I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the cool aspects of combat that unfortunately get buried by everything else in the game. Maybe I'll come back to it in February when they release a new game plus and fix the PC performance issues, but I doubt it, because while I think the combat has potential, so many other things about this game are boring, disappointing, or pretentious. Thanks for watching.